right. I mean, what a gift. And we talked about this on the phone. What a gift it is to your family that at that time when something
Yes.
occurs, they're mourning, they're dealing with their own emotional stuff.
Right.
To then have to add these other things on
Right.
top can be very difficult.
Very difficult. Yes, ma'am.
I know that I've experienced it on my husband's side of the family and different situations that had pre-arrangements been handled, that those things would not have happened.
Right.
So let's talk about what motivated you specifically to get into this industry.
I think there's a few things that really stand out here. The first reason is that I saw a need. I saw a need within my own community, how we just don't know. And that is not just about my community, it's about several. We just don't know, and the education is not there. Until someone passes, you don't know what to expect in future.
Right.
So that was my first reason why. The second is I wanted my children to see their mother doing something that she had a passion for, and something that is respected. And they love it, they see it, they understand it.
Yes.
I mean, I think they're 12, 16, 29. And so I know the 29-year-old gets it, 16 understands it. 12 is just like, so proud of mommy.
Right.
But this is something I want to bring to all, because there's no education there. Until, like I said, we get into those rooms and we have the fights back in the back.
And wait, I'm going to stop you here. Let's talk about this really quick. Give me, because people love stories, right? And so, give me a story of a situation that has happened that you've witnessed, and why this is so important.
So working in a funeral home that I was there before, and that's where I got all this motivation. There were families that would come in and not know what mom or what dad wanted. And so prearranging helps them to figure that out. So sitting there in the room with the family, so many examples. One of my favorite to speak about, and it's hard. It's a very hard subject. But this family came in, one gentleman came in first, and he goes, my mom passed on, and she wanted my sister to have 3 or 4 different spaces. She didn't leave them to us. She said, my sister. And we all need to sign off on this and make sure my sister has the spaces. However, the brothers lived in California and somewhere else, and the sister had no idea that this was a part that she was playing in. And no one wanted to sign those documents to give her the spaces, because they all despised that brother.
Wow.
And the reason they despised that brother is because he was the one that was there with mom, and he is the one she made the executor and passed everything along to. And it's a sad situation to see that he had to feel like that along with mom's death, and they wouldn't come together to sign off those spaces to where mom wanted them to go. So that sticks in the back of my mind.
Yes.
That is another reason we need a will, those types of things, so that everybody knows their place when mom, dad, sister, brother passes. So that's one of them.
What makes this so fulfilling for you?
For me,
Yes.
I like to see, so in the funeral industry first, there's before, which is what I'm working on now, is the pre-need part, and then there's the at-need part.
Right.
So if you can get to families before that at-need happens, then the fulfilling part for me is to say, look, you've got your pre-need insurance. They have captured the price. There is no way that they can add pricing or anything different to that pre-need. So you're locking in your pricing by purchasing right now.
Okay.
What you need to understand too in the funeral business is that every single year it increases 4 to 8%.
Wow.
So the spaces, the service itself, everything, the headstones and markers, everything goes up.
And let's talk
4
about
to
that.
8%.
What is the average cost? You know, because we know that it can fluctuate
Oh, yes.
depending on what the family wants,
Right.
the type of casket, the
Right.
amount of
Gosh.
plot. But what is the average cost for a funeral?
So funeral, it's burial, cremation, and I would say the average cost that I've dealt with for an actual burial would be 10 to 15,000 at least.
Wow.
And that's with not the bells and whistles. That's not even with the space. So at the space that starts sometimes $2,000 to $4,000 on top of that. So I would say about 19 is an easy number for a funeral.
Wow.
And that's with the space, not the headstone. That's with the space, that's with the service itself. So it depends on what that family's budget is.
Right.
It depends on how much they're willing to pay monthly. But for me, I see it as we're getting ahead of what's to come.
Correct.
And those price increases.
And a lot of times people look at it from the perspective of, okay, it's one person passing.
Right.
But like the other day, unfortunately, I read a story where 4 people in a family
Yes.
got in a car accident
Yes.
in Grand Prairie. You might
Yes.
have heard about that.
Yes.
Now that's 4 funerals right there.
Right.
And you're not prepared for that
No,
financially
not at
unless
all.
you do pre-planning.
Exactly. And another thing that I see families doing because of the money is a lot of cremations, and they might not want cremation.
Right.
They might want the burial. So if you get ahead of it, you can say, this is what I chose.
But
and
even
it's ready to go.
cremations are costly.
Create cremations, you can, so there's options. You can do a direct cremation, and it just is a cremation. There's no service, there's no nothing. You're cremated and given your cremains, is what we call them, back to the family. But cremations usually are about $3,500 to start and higher. If you're wanting to do a memorial service, a graveside service, things like that, they all come into account, and they all equal dollar signs to the
Wow.
funeral homes. Yes.
Yes.
So a part of my business, and the best part, is helping a family say, you know, we have $5,000. What can we do with this? You want cremation? You want burial? Where do you want to be buried? Those types of things. So that's the best part of my day, is saying, we've got you set up. We know where you're going to go. We know what you want done, and we're paying on that. So your family won't accrue those financial difficulties later.
And what is the difference? Because I've heard some people be a little bit confused saying, well, I already have insurance. Isn't that what that's for?
So there is life insurance. And I want to say to everyone, if you have life insurance, keep paying your life insurance. If it lapses, you will have to go back in at your age now, and they might not be able to cover you. So there might not be any life coverage for you at certain ages. Keep that going, but pre-need insurance is also a necessity, because that actually locks in the price of your funeral. Then that's cremation or burial, but it locks in your pricing. You can't come back to this family and say, we have a casket on this pre-need for $1,000,
Right.
but the price has gone up to $5,000. Who cares?
Yes.
That family is not responsible.
And life insurance is meant to be for
the living Yes.
expenses that you're going to leave
Yes.
to your family
Your family,
members
right.
that they might incur.
Right.
And so this is separate, and that's why it's got to be treated separate.
Right.
But I've heard a lot of that. Well,
People
my life
don't
insurance
know.
will cover that.
Right. People don't know. And I don't think that, speaking because of the way my grandmother did it, she did it beautifully. She had life insurance. And I remember as a little girl listening to her calling constantly and saying, what's going on now? You know, just being in touch with what your policy is about,
Yes.
so that your family doesn't have to worry. So she did that, and then she had her pre-need. So when grandma died, my family wasn't faced with that difficulty. We could grieve, because that is our matriarch. That is the person I would go to Houston to see, whether I saw anybody else.
Right.
It would be my grandmother. So when she passed, it was very hard. And you don't want that hard, along with trying to figure out the money, you know? And so I think that she did it beautifully. We had the suit, we had the shoes, we had everything. But the life insurance was left to her children.
Yes.
And my mom is close to 70. But she left money to all of her children. And she just did a beautiful job. So that's my example. And that's what I'm doing for my children.
I love it.
Yes.
I love it. I'm so
Yes.
proud of you.
Thank
We're
you.
speaking to Lena Kilman. She is the president of MLK Prearrangements, LLC. And we're talking about getting everything pre-set up prior to a family member, yourself even, passing away. How important that is, and so many people sometimes don't want to talk about it. If you just logged into www.fbrn.us from all around the world, I just want to say thank you for jumping in and catching the interview show. If you're watching on our Facebook page, make sure you put your name down there, because at the end we're going to do 3 giveaways that I think will be really exciting for you, especially if you haven't done any pre-arranging. And so make sure you say your name and where you are listening from. Thank you again for listening to Fishbowl Radio Network, the interview show. Our guest today, Lena Killian.
Yes.
I want to say that correct.
Yes, you're fine.
All right.
It's perfect.
And so, what if there's a member, and this kind of happened with my dad. My dad was in insurance, so he had everything pre-planned, everything set up, which was a big gift for us,
Bet.
except for when it came to this stuff, the pre-arrangement stuff. We couldn't get him to, he kept avoiding it. He kept not wanting to talk about it, not wanting to do it. Finally, we got it done.
Right.
He's 90 now. But how do you start talking to someone that might be having that hard time? And why do you think they're having such a hard time when we all know this is part of life?
I think the conversation has been, for me, there are people that are just fearful of death. And that's how it is. That's just how we live. There are people that understand death is going to happen. So what is the best way to pass on? What do we do for our families? What are we passing on? Do we want them to struggle? Do we want them to try to figure out what we wanted? Those types of things are the conversation that I start. I have several people that have been like, Lena, I don't want to talk about that. It's just, I'm too young for that. And
Yes.
the truth is, I don't rush people into this.
Right.
But when you are ready, we'll have that conversation. And I'm very lighthearted about this. This is not at the time of need, which is where everything is morbid. It is sad.
Yes.
This is beforehand. So we
Yes.
can laugh it up. We can
Yeah.
figure out if you want a carriage. We can see if you want to be shot up to the moon, whatever you want. What kind of jewelry you want your cremains to be put in.
Right.
And so I try to soften that. And I think I'm very good at that with my families. And it's just a conversation. We're not saying we're putting you in the ground today. We're saying we're getting you prepared for
Right.
what will happen, and we don't know when it is. So it's the way that I approach it is like, look, I'm 50. I'm going to be 51. I don't know when I'll pass away. I just want to make sure my children don't have to worry about what mama wanted. And so that is how I start. Like, what does your husband want? Who's going to be there for you?
Yes.
Who's your champion? Who's going to say this is what she and he wanted? So those are the conversation starters I have. It's just to let families know this is not about what's happening tomorrow. This is not going to happen to you just because we're talking about it.
Right.
This is just something that it's a necessity, as I feel.
Yeah,
We
it's a
need to get ahead of it.
necessity.
Yes, we need to talk about it. So
What do you
it's
think
that.
is a good age to start kind of
I'd say in your
calling
20s.
you and get-
So for me, it's just about getting those people to sit with themselves and have that 5-minute conversation. Sit with me, and we can laugh about it and put it together.
Right.
But just know what you want, know where you want to be, and understand too that your policy is transferable. So if you're in the state of Texas and you choose to move to Utah, you can take that policy with you and find a funeral home. It might not be apples to apples. It might be apples to oranges because they might have the same things.
Yes.
But just understand that, transfer it, and let's have that discussion.